Good morning and welcome back to the best on ground weekday kickoff for Party Shirt Friday, the 3rd of July, 2020. Jim Tucker joins me on the line. How are you, Jim?
Very good, mate. You hit me in my sweet spot with the party shirt. So it's the earliest I've ever worn one, but very happy to oblige.
Earliest he's worn one unless he hasn't gone to bed. For those watching for the first time, the premise of the show is very, very simple. We have some of Australia's top journalists joining us on a rotation every day of the week, Monday to Friday, and we rip through 5 of the biggest stories making waves in the media this morning in the world of sport. We're going to start in Queensland, which seems appropriate seeing as we're both up here. And in the Courier Mail, Jim, your former longtime colleague, Robert Craddock, he looks into the differences between Anthony Seibold and Wayne Bennett as this war of words continues to escalate between the former and current Broncos coaches. Bennett's strengths, according to Craddock, even if he might be losing some of his tactical nous, his strengths are around the man management side of things and his ability to get around his players. Is that empathy something that Seibold's missing and potentially contributing to the Broncos' current state?
That's a really good question. You look at Bennett and I'll background you a little bit there. Players like Justin Hodges, Darius Boyd, Jimmy the Jet Roberts. Bennett had an amazing ability to bring out the best in some of these almost wounded birds when they first started at the Broncos. Got great results out of them. Seibold is swimming around. We want to see him get the best out of Anthony Milford. We want to see him conjure up something from some of the big forwards and really pull out a match winner out of some of these younger guys. I don't think it all comes down to how Seibold manages the emotions of some of these young guys or drags out personal connections. You look at the Broncos, can't tackle, conceding the most points of any team in the NRL, and you're winning with a young team starts with defence. They put on Peter Ryan, who's a defensive gun for hire as a coach. That'll make a big difference, I feel, for the Broncos.
And for those watching at home, you might have just seen the Golden Strainer make its first appearance. This is how we make sure that we keep the topics short, sharp and on the point. But some great points there. And we'll watch the Broncos-Warriors clash with absolute interest this weekend. Our second story down in Mexico in the Herald Sun comes from Michael Warner. Warner looks into the direction within the AFL headquarters itself to look at reducing the number of staff. They don't announce the exact numbers anymore, but I'll quote from Warner here, who says that the workforce is believed to have soared beyond 600 before COVID hit. In an internal presentation to staff this week, the AFL said, we want to rebound from this unprecedented time on the offence. Our new AFL will be faster, agile, energised, and will ruthlessly prioritise what's most important. Jim, are we going to see all sports organisations and professional bodies a lot leaner moving forward post-COVID? And if we do, what does that actually mean for the everyday sports fan?
Absolutely. We've seen in Australia probably that bloated period where staffs and organisations are much bigger than they need to be. It's all based on broadcast dollars coming in. And there's not, if you had $1 million in your pocket, you wouldn't invest in a sporting team, basically. Like you go through losses. It's not a money-making venture in the short term. And I think the AFL, they're not immune. Just like Rugby Australia shed 47 full-time jobs, 30 contractors. The NRL's had to really chop. And the AFL's doing exactly the same. They'll be leaner and perhaps better for it. They've just got mountains of gold in Melbourne, but even those golden piles have evaporated somewhat during this COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's just reality time for sport generally, and we're seeing it around the world. English Premier League, we're seeing championship teams in England. We've seen clubs wound up just because they can't meet the money requirements, and that's just a very harsh reality of life moving forward.
So really quickly then, for fans, does that mean more expensive tickets and memberships or merchandise? Does it mean less halftime activity and less activations and less of a game day experience?
I think less activations for sure. I think, and some people won't quibble with this, that it's more about the footy. They'll be seeing the game on the field as just like it once was. That's the absolute selling point of your code, the spectacle on the field.
Perfect. Fantastic, Jim. We move to our big topic of the day, which we're going to spend a little bit more time on. And this is from friend of the show, Tom Decent, in the Sydney Morning Herald. Former Wallabies coach Michael Cheika took part in an Instagram live with Wallabies great David Campese yesterday, and decent reporting on some of the elements of that chat. Cheika with some very stern words around Scott Johnson's role as Director of Rugby, and really urging for Rugby Australia to let incoming Wallabies coach Dave Rennie have a good crack on his own and make sure there's only one chief. Rennie and Johnson have worked together before in the Scottish system, so they do know each other, but Rennie hasn't been a test rugby coach before. Do you think Johnson needs to take a backward step and make sure Rennie's the man in charge?
I think they'll work in partnership. I think Michael Cheika's reinvented the narrative a little bit there. Michael Cheika would not have had a job for 2019 without someone working beside him. His Wallabies team had gone off the rails in 2018. So Johnson was there, a co-selector, Michael O'Connor, was there just to offer advice. Michael O'Connor made the very key comment saying, I'm not there to pick a team above Michael Cheika. I'm to perhaps nudge him into thinking about other players. He is still the chief. Michael O'Connor made that statement right from the very start of his tenure as a national selector. The reason Cheika didn't perform at the World Cup was because he didn't coach it as well as he could have. When I see props trying to touch on balls in their own quarter, coming out of defence, running on attack from their own quarter, that's not going to win games at World Cups. And Michael Cheika got found out in some areas of his coaching. Very good in some areas, but he failed. No one else did at the 2019 World Cup.
There's probably a school of thought as well that Johnson and Cheika, similar personality types, neither are backwards and coming forward, both abrasive, and I say that not in a critical sense, but relatively abrasive and straight to the point in terms of their communications. Johnson and Rennie, on the other hand, quite different. Rennie comes across as a very calm, measured man, really kind of renowned for his ability to develop relationships, particularly amongst that super successful Chiefs team over in New Zealand for so many years. And they've worked together with each other before. Surely this is only going to position the Wallabies even stronger moving forward.
Yeah, I think Rennie's a good choice. They picked the best coach available. Some will still grate their teeth that it's not an Aussie, but there was just not an Aussie candidate. I think Dave Rennie has really good skills, not only in developing players, but he plays an attacking brand of footy, as we saw with some of those great Chiefs sides. Also, obviously, no shortcuts with the abrasive forward play he wants. He's going to come in with a fresh sort of team. A lot of more senior players have moved on. So he gets that advantage where he can mould his team in his identity. I think Dave Rennie's a good choice. And I do think he'll work well with Johnson. Johnson doesn't want to be the El Supremo of Australian rugby. He wants to nudge and move things around on the edges. So you do have maybe senior players from the past come in and help younger players. He wants to make sure there's more synergy between the Super Rugby provinces and the Wallabies. So one's feeding into the other. He's got a lot of those things on his plate. He doesn't want to be coaching the team. So I think Dave Rennie is going to be good.
To our penultimate topic now, and we move to NRL.com and a really interesting article from Alicia Newton there, looking at whether the NRLW competition, which has been confirmed to proceed this year despite COVID-19, could look to utilise some of the Australian women's rugby sevens superstars. Of course, 2016 gold medalists in Rio. The World Rugby Sevens series has been put on ice or cancelled for the rest of the season. So the girls don't have any matches to play. Rugby Australia is obviously paying their contracts at the moment. Could it be a win-win to allow these girls to go and play in the NRLW competition? It alleviates some of the financial stress for Rugby Australia, and it gives the likes of Charlotte Caslick, Ivania Polite, Elia Green and Alicia Lucas, for example, the opportunity to strut their stuff on home soil for once.
I think it's a really strong point you make there. I think that we're in a different world at the moment. There's no footy for them to play. They all have a vibe for rugby league. Even Charlotte Caslick last year, she trained with a women's rugby league team. just for fun. She is an exceptionally skillful player. I've said more than once that she can pass the ball left to right more accurately than most Reds backs, and she is an exceptional player. She would jump at the chance if an opening was created. She's obviously contracted to Rugby Australia, but these are unusual times, and Rugby League would get a huge boost out of that, because these girls, a lot of them are super elite compared to the NRLW girls. They've been playing and training professionally for a number of years, and they would really light up that NRLW competition. Now, looking at a wider view, you go, okay, these girls need to play footy, and it'd be almost restraint of trade not to let them have a crack at something.
And another interesting side note there, of course, with the New Zealand Warriors team in that competition, we might even see some of the world champion Black Ferns in there as well. Our final topic today, to a sport you love. Well, at least I know you love the red ball side of it in terms of Test cricket, but we're going to talk Big Bash, and Ben Horn in the Daily Telegraph reporting that the Big Bash is going to launch on the evening of day one of a Test match between Australia and India this year. I guess some of the frustration with the Big Bash in recent years and some of its decline in popularity has been around the lack of access to the Australian superstars. Looks like we're going to see that again for the majority of the competition in 2021. Do you think the Big Bash will continue to slide and lose a bit of relevance because of that?
No, I think the absolute number one thing about the Big Bash was cricket people got greedy and extended the season too long. As soon as the school holidays was over, the decline was rapid. It was just too long. Just went on and on and on. I think the more streamlined, shorter period of time, just snuck into the school holidays, start to finish, works fine. I think in the last few years, we've even surprised ourselves as viewers. We've been able to switch from watching a Test match during the day and click on the Big Bash even that same night. And I think that works fine. And there's distinct viewing markets in many ways. Mums, dads, kids just relish the Big Bash. They're jumping in there. But it also feeds into the interest in Test cricket. So I think they're very compatible together. The shorter season is the most important element for the Big Bash.
We have seen uplift in terms of TV numbers and attendances in some other sports around Australasia. So maybe we'll see the same at play there. Jim, before I ask you for your wonder watch in the world of sport this weekend, I just want to send a massive shout out to everyone who's been watching and listening to the show over the first fortnight. It's been a lot of fun to put together, and the feedback's been pretty overwhelming. Make sure that you do subscribe via either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just search for the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff, where, of course, you can see the show on Facebook and on Twitter. Jim, what's your wonder watch this weekend, mate?
Oh, there's only one. Friday night, no one beats the Queensland Reds 12 times in a row, if I could tell you that, Pete. And big game at Suncorp Stadium Friday night. The Queensland Reds, I think they've got it in their bones to knock off the New South Wales Waratahs. Big Super Rugby kickoff. It's got everything, really. Queensland have been downtrodden for too long in this fixture, and Brad Thorne has them fired up to win this game. And I do think they have a better organised and more coherent side. I think Queensland Reds by 7.
Queensland Reds by 7. Really looking forward to seeing what many are saying is a future Wallaby back row there in Fraser McWright, Harry Wilson and Liam Wright in operation. Jim, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Watch plenty of sport this weekend. Gold Coast Suns a sneaky chance to get over Geelong down there. That's my hot tip. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Cheers, Pete.